This time I'll call the May Board of Commissioner meeting to order, and I'll ask that you stand. Commissioner Rebbolz will lead the invocation, and Commissioner Walker will do the pledge.
Let us pray. Dear Lord, we thank you for allowing us to gather here to do the work of the people of your county. Give us wisdom and discernment as we deliberate tonight, so that we may make judgments and decisions that are pleasing in your name. We ask all this in your Son's name, our Lord and Savior. Amen.
Amen.
Please place the flag. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I would ask that you cut your telephone off or put it in the mute stage. The fine is going from 25 to 50. So, and we don't want anybody to have to pay the $50 fine. We're down to item number C, the conflict of interest disclosure. Does any commissioner have a conflict of interest that needs to be disclosed? Hearing none. We're down to item number D, the approval of the agenda. Could I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Could I have just a little agenda item about notifying commissioners, like for instance, the jail situation Friday night? Just a brief discussion.
Yes.
Just add that. I don't think it would have to be closed session because we're just. And part of my question got answered earlier today with the email from the county manager, but I still have another question.
Did you want to address that, Brian?
Yes, sir. In accordance with the board's policy, if you're going to add an agenda item to the board, to the meeting, it has to be considered an emergency item, and it has to be a supermajority of the board to vote to approve that.
It is an emergency item.
Okay.
Is that a motion?
Yes. Make that a motion?
All right. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Thank you.
Put it where you want to.
Put over his 2 minute comments, then you can adjourn, we can go home.
Well, we'll put it at the end since that's being added.
There you go.
All right. Nay, is it okay to go ahead and make a motion to approve the minute? Agenda? All right.
Motion to approve the agenda, addition.
Is and a second. Okay. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Thank you. We're down to the public comments. We did not have anybody sign up. Okay. All right. We're down to legislative updates, and I don't see William Moore here. So we'll go to item 4 presentation. Commissioner Richardson.
Reducing drug use in society and sentencing practices, Commissioner Richardson. I wanted this thing on the agenda because we are awash in drugs in North Carolina, not the United States. I'm seeing more and more families that are affected. I doubt that there's a single family in Beaufort County that has not been affected by the use of illegal drugs, whether they're prescription drugs or whether they are the illegal, so to speak, homemade drugs, whatever. Some of the conversations I've had with some of the people in the judicial system go like this: until you make the sentence harsh enough so that it's not worth doing the crime, you're going to continue to have what you have today. So with that in mind, the county manager invited the district attorney, if he would come before us, tell us basically how the sentencing system works and give us his thoughts or advice should he so desire. So with that, I think we're probably ready for the district attorney.
Seth, welcome.
Good afternoon.
Saw you first thing this morning, and looks like I'll finish up with you tonight.
I think I'm still feeling that cheese biscuit.
Aren't we all?
Always a pleasure to come before you. I appreciate what all of you do for our county. I'll try to be as brief as possible. I don't plan to be long, and certainly will take any questions, and will do my best to answer any questions that you have. But I wanted to give a very brief overview about our sentencing structure in North Carolina. Prior to 1994, we were under what was called the Fair Sentencing Act. All that changed in 1994. Now we have what's called structured sentencing, which is similar to the federal system where we have a grid that we use. So prior to 1994, you would hear people that would receive long prison sentences. The judge may say 20 years, but they'd be out in 2. And so when structured sentencing came along in 1994, one of the main things they wanted to do was to include what they call truth in sentencing. When the judge says X number of months, the judge means X number of months, and that person will serve X number of months. Now, normally, what we have is a minimum and a maximum sentence, and it may be a traditional sentence for a Class H felony is a minimum of 6 months and a maximum of 17 months. So if that person goes to prison for that offense, they start serving a 17th-month sentence. But they can, with good time and gain time and good behavior, they can knock time off of that. But the law says they have to serve at least a minimum of 6 months. So we know there is truth in that if they say minimum 6 months, it's going to be a minimum of 6 months. Now, I think I emailed you a grid or a chart that the judge has to use now when he sentences or she sentences a person, whether it be probation or whether it be an active sentence. This chart has been amended a number of times over the years by the legislature, but each time that it's been amended, it didn't increase the punishment, it reduces the punishment. And then in 2011, the legislature passed what's called the Justice Reinvestment Act, and it did a number of things in regard to how we sentence habitual felons. It reduced that. Instead of a person on this chart, in the old days, a Class I felony might be possession of cocaine or forgery, which is the lowest level of a felony. And in the old days, if you had 3 or more previous felony convictions that didn't overlap, you're called what's called a habitual felon. In California, they call it 3 strikes, but ours is called a habitual felon. And so prior to 2011, if a person is convicted of any felony, even if it's a Class I felony for possession of cocaine, and they're a habitual felon, it automatically goes up to a Class C felony, which is serious prison time. Now in 2011, that was changed to if a Class I felon is now treated as a habitual felon, it only goes up 4 levels. So instead of going up to a C, it would go up to a Class E. And I think part of the rationale behind that is someone is forging a check or is a drug addict and is possessing cocaine, and then lo and behold, the next thing you know, they're serving 12 to 15 years. And so the legislature felt like that was a bit much. The other issue with habitual felons that came up is that is really in the discretion of the DA. It's not an automatic designation. So you really have about 3 groups of prosecutors in North Carolina. About a third of them use habitual felons every time they can. About a third never use habitual felons. And then you have a third that do it on a case-by-case basis, depending on all the facts and circumstances. And I don't mind telling you, I fall in that third group. It's not automatic, but in appropriate situations, we certainly use that. But I will say, Commissioner Richardson, as it relates specifically to drugs, which is the subject of the conversation today, drug trafficking is not under structured sentencing, nor DWIs. So every offense in North Carolina is under structured sentencing since 1994. And under one of these grids, there's a misdemeanor grid similar to the felony, except for drug trafficking and DWIs. They have their own set of sentencing laws. And drug trafficking relates specifically to the weight of the drugs that were found in the possession of the suspect. We all, just in layman's terms, will call a drug dealer a trafficker. But just by selling does not make them guilty of trafficking. It's based on the amount. But if they are convicted of trafficking based on the drug trafficking grid, there are mandatory prison active terms. There's no probation for drug trafficking. So, for example, if a person is convicted of 28 or more grams of possession of cocaine, and trafficking can be by possession, they don't have to be the one actually caught selling it. They can be driving it through town. That's trafficking by transportation. So if they have 28 grams of cocaine, for example, that is considered a Class G trafficking felony, and the punishment for that is a minimum of 35 months and a maximum of 51 months. So that is active time, no probation. There's something in North Carolina, and I think every state has a version of this, it's called substantial assistance. That's when a drug dealer or a drug addict is found in possession of some form of drugs, and then they provide assistance to law enforcement. And our law enforcement officials rely heavily on the information that they do receive. So sometimes that is sometimes they're paid. They're just flat out paid to do the work, and then sometimes they work off maybe something with their sentence. The one thing that I would say to all of you is the trend in North Carolina certainly is not building more prisons. I look today, and since the late 90s, the state has closed 60 prisons in North Carolina. And what we are taught when we go to conferences is it's a cost measure, similar to what the commissioners you do when you're looking at how much does it cost to keep somebody in the Beaufort County Jail a day versus how much does it cost to put them on the electronic monitoring. You find that it's a saving to have them on electronic monitoring. I saw some statistics today where in North Carolina the average cost to incarcerate a person in the prison for a year is over $35,000, and the average cost to have somebody on probation for a year is under $2,000. So that's why the legislature is annually trying to find ways to have less people in prison. One other thing that I'll say, and certainly anytime I'm open to any questions that you may have, this chart that I sent you, or the felony chart, there's really, down the left side, you have to determine what the offense class is. Class A being first-degree murder, Class I being the lowest felony in North Carolina. And the second part of the equation is what is their prior record level. And for prior convictions, they are assigned a certain number of points. So the worse your record is, the further you move to the right in this chart, and the numbers get higher and higher. The overwhelming majority of convicted felons in North Carolina over many, many years fall in the H and I felony blocks. So the bottom two felonies are the majority of convicted felons that we have in our state, and over 50% of them are in prior record level 1 or 2. So in other words, when you look at the bottom left corner of this chart, those 4 blocks down there, those numbers are not very big as far as terms of months, and so most of the people that are convicted of those offenses are not going to prison, and even if they do go to prison, it's not for very long. It's been my experience that every so often a kingpin comes into the court system, and if they are truly a kingpin, lots of times the federal authorities are involved. And if it is truly a kingpin that is moving big weight, then they are getting convicted of trafficking, they are getting active sentences, or not getting out on probation. Most of the drug dealers that we see day in and day out are selling, but they're to support their own habit. You know, it's very few that are sitting over in the corner and just dealing out drugs and not doing it themselves. Now, I try to a second-degree murder in Hyde County last year. It was an overdose case where 2 young people died. They thought they were snorting cocaine, but it was heroin with fentanyl, and it killed them immediately. The drug dealer in that case was one of those. All the evidence was he'd come down from Charlotte on the weekends, he'd stand over in the corner and just sell all night long. He never did the heroin, never did the cocaine. He would drink a little bit, but that was it. So it was his business. But those type cases are fairly rare, at least it's been in my experience. It's more of the dealers are selling to support their own habit. Now, I can think of one right now whose case is pending, so I'm not going to call his name, but he's one that exactly why you're asking me the question and why I'm here today. He has sold drugs for the last 25 years. He'll do a short prison sentence, he'll get out, and he keeps selling. We catch him again, and it's kind of the same thing over and over. And so now, this particular person, we finally got him for habitual felon. And one way or another, if everything goes appropriately as it should, he's going to be gone for a while. It is a very difficult problem that we face, and I think it's very, very appropriate. You're asking the right questions. I will say, I often say this in jest, but I'm serious about it. If I knew the answer to this, I wouldn't be the district attorney. I'd be the president. I mean, it's that big of a dilemma, and I'm not saying that there's certainly things we can always improve on, but it's a tough question, especially now there's a national trend going more towards the treatment side of this, as opposed to the so-called war on drugs.
Questions?
Okay. Are you seeing any additional fentanyl coming into the county as of recently?
Yes.
To what extent are you seeing it in terms of relative percentage? I would say over a year ago. Say 2 years.
Well, I have seen it. It has increased. I can't give you the math, but it has increased quite a bit throughout the pandemic. Why that is, I don't really know. But we're seeing it more and more. And this trial that I referenced in Hyde County, I had the toxicologist from the North Carolina Medical Examiner's Office testify. And what he said is nowadays, what you call heroin is not, he looked at me and said, it's not your father's heroin. Those were his exact words on the stand. He said, nowadays it's all fentanyl. They call it heroin, but it has nothing to do with the poppy plant that comes from South America. It is strictly being marketed as heroin, but it's 100% fentanyl, which we all know is 100 times stronger than morphine. And so it's just a very dangerous thing. And the other thing that this toxicologist said that he's seeing more and more of is people when they get out of prison that were drug addicts, even maybe selling, but they get out. The day they get out, they go back to using these same drugs, and because they've been in prison, they have no tolerance. So they're using the same amount as they did before they went in, and they're dying that very day. And we had someone this week who's been in been in jail. Let me back up. Last week, we had Superior Court. It was a gentleman that pled guilty, received probation, and supposedly that day he got out with his girlfriend and overdosed. You know, he had been in jail for, I think, a couple of months. His tolerance was down, and it almost killed him. And so we are seeing that a lot.
So, just to summarize, you're seeing more fentanyl, but you're also seeing a total masking of the heroin epidemic, which was terrible, is being replaced by fentanyl, but still cloaked as heroin.
Yes.
So, in other words, the fentanyl is maybe overwhelming. I mean, since it's replaced heroin.
It is. And the toxicologist said the sad thing about it is the drug user that's buying it, they know that it's fentanyl. They're not even fooled by the fact that they think it's heroin. And, you know, back in the 70s, heroin might have been 15% pure. And then over the years, the purity of that drug just kept increasing. And now the drug dealer, and the fentanyl supposedly is coming from China manufactured through Mexico into the United States. And it's just tearing us up.
Thank you, Seth. You answered my third question.
Yeah. And I will say something that I'm shocked by. I was surprised to see this statistic that for fiscal year 2021, the top felony conviction in North Carolina, the offense, was possession of methamphetamine. Secondly, was possession of firearm by a felon, then breaking and entering, obtaining property by false pretense, and felony larceny. All of those, except for the firearm by a felon, are all related. You think about the people that break in homes and steal stuff, and steal something and take it to the pawn shop and represent that they own it when they don't. That's obtaining property by false pretense. All of that is substance abuse related. And then you've got the firearm by a felon, or usually the drug dealers that are carrying the firearms. And if in the federal authorities, sometimes if they get that kind of case, this Project Safe Neighborhood, they call it, when there's convicted felons with guns, sometimes they come in and take those cases because they can really hammer them.
Well, I thank you for your report. All of the things that you have said today just reinforce my thinking on this. That is, number one, we have a system that is permissive toward drugs, and it's becoming more and more permissive simply because the taxpayers, the politicians think the taxpayers don't want to build more prisons. I would like for us to move this board, along with all the other help we can get, toward taking a look at the sentencing structure for drugs, focusing on anybody that exchanges drugs for money. Anybody that does, I'm not talking about the user. I have some sympathy for the user, but not much. But focusing toward the exchange of money for drugs. Doesn't matter about the quantity. And that they get a harsh, hard sentence, and that we approach, a part of this was to lobby the legislature, build another prison to hold these people. And they go up for a long enough time that it's not worth the crime. Because the judges that I've talked to all say the same thing. As soon as the penalty gets harsh enough, they won't be selling drugs because they know they're out of circulation if they get caught. We've got a permissive system. The cannabis thing is nothing in the world but a big lie on the public that this stuff doesn't hurt you. I haven't seen a doctor yet that doesn't say the same thing, and thank you. And that is that this stuff is just as addictive as anything else, that after a while it becomes addictive and it's a stepping stone drug into more harsh drugs. So I have no sympathy for that. The medical uses of this stuff, you can get the medicine instead of buying the drug. It's just an excuse. But now we have companies that have gone into the business of growing and selling this stuff, and sponsored by some very big political figures out of Washington, D.C. The former Speaker of the House is the chief lobbyist for this stuff. So I would like for this board to consider, if not tonight, at the next meeting, putting together a committee, the purpose of which is to lobby the legislature for a harsh and firm sentence for the exchange of money for drugs. And I'm not talking about quantities. I don't care how much, if you do any. And that we also lobby the legislature for building more prisons to hold these people until we can get through this thing. If you look at the history of China, if you look at the history of some of the Indonesian countries in that particular area of Asia, you will find that in the past they have had such tremendous problems with drugs that have ruined their society. In those countries, you get the death penalty for possession. Not sale, possession. And that's why you see on the TV every once in a while somebody tried to cross into a country with drugs. Well, they were pretty dumb because the countries they're crossing into put you in prison for a long time or kill you for even having the drugs. And the families that have been ruined with drugs and because of drugs, we are paying a very high penalty for this. I have a problem with the focus on the user. You can never win the battle of helping the user. You just can't win it because you're not saying stop using it. You're saying we're going to help you. And go ahead and do what you can to help them, but until we stop the sale, we're not going anywhere. So I would like for us to lobby the legislature for a harsh, set sentence for the exchange of money for drugs. That would cover anything you want to cover, whether they're legal or illegal or whatever. And that be a firm, hard sentence. You're not going to get out of it. And the other thing is, that we keep hearing about the jails, and the legislature's trying to save us money. They're pouring money down a lot of rat holes. We need to put the money into helping society and the people that are suffering with this stuff, and that is into building more prisons in order to hold these people. Yes, you're going to have a peak. After about 10 years, you're going to start seeing things get under control, but it's going to take that long, in my opinion, at least to get control of this. It's not a slap on the wrist. It's not a don't do that. And we have people come in front of us all the time with bleeding hearts of helping drug users. I'm not sympathetic that way. The people that I want to see us help are the dealers. The people who are exchanging money for drugs. And it's as simple as that. So do I hear anybody that is interested in going that same direction?
Well, we're going to be in Raleigh. Is it May the 14th, Brian? Assembly Day. So that's where we'll have the opportunity to, I don't know, to do some lobbying. Seth, in some states, I'm hearing now that a 14-year-old can go online, can order and have it delivered by Amazon or FedEx or somebody like that. Have we seen anything happen like that?
I have not seen that in this location, but I'm confident that it can be done. Especially ordering certain products that are legal in some states and illegal here, So I know folks go to surrounding states and buy it legally and then bring it back, and even though technically it's illegal here in North Carolina. So,
any other commissioner?
Well, let me add a comment to what I was saying. The reason that I want a committee, going and lobbying is fine. The reason I want a committee is, number one, we'll have some permanency. Number two, we need to be reaching out to other counties, cities, and organizations to support us in this effort. Because right now, the drug lobby is a lot better organized than we are. Mm-hmm. So if you don't want to talk about this tonight, it'll go back on the agenda for the next meeting for the formation of a committee.
Let's just put it on the agenda for the next meeting.
It's all right with me.
Well, here again, we have District 1, District 2 meeting on Thursday of this week in Edenton, which is made up of, 15 candidates in the group. Anyone else have a question of Seth?
Only thing I got, this is not directed at Seth. He's doing a good job. But the thing that you got to look at, right now we talk about fentanyl. But look at what you got to look at is treatment. People need treatment. And the other thing about it is, fentanyl is not as bad as those pills that people were using. And there was opioids and stuff like that. And that was one of our legislators' goals. We get ready to get a nice check coming in here sometime next year, or this year, isn't it, Brian? Because of these same things. So he told you right there, it's a very small percentage of people, of drug dealers that's not using it, are selling it to get their use. Mr. Big is somewhere else. So we would be doing much good in Beaufort County is doing anything until we could get Mr. Big, because the guys that's selling is going to continue to sell if he's using. And that's what the DA just said. He's selling it to support his own habit. Is that correct?
that's correct.
Yes.
Well, you go ahead.
Let's see. You want?
No, I just want to put it on the agenda for the next meeting.
Okay. Randy, did you go? Okay.
Yeah, I'd just like to follow up. Your commentary tonight has been rather elucidating, and I think Hood, from listening to our district attorney, one of the things he said was we've closed, 60 prisons? We just reopened some of the prisons. That would be good. And I would like to see if we were going to advocate, which I think we as commissioners should do in all cases where it costs us a lot, and this costs us a lot, is we advocate for very severe penalties for selling fentanyl. And I'm going to tell you, when it comes to saving money and spending less money, if you were to close the southern border rather than keeping it wide open and quit babysitting the people that you want to come into America by the millions and let those Border Patrol agents do their jobs, we'd be better off. Then build the wall. You want to save money? Build the wall. We spent more money housing illegals when they were being brought in as a political measure in the early days of the Biden-Harris administration. We spent more money housing these illegals than building a wall, which all of a sudden became expensive to Democrats. I don't understand that. But I mean, if you want a government to run efficiently, do what's right. Close the southern border for a variety of reasons, not least of which tonight we speak of fentanyl. And thank you for telling us it's coming up through Mexico. I appreciate your honesty.
Well, one thing I'd like to add, if we're having a district county commissioners meeting, which we do, once a year,
Yes.
and coming up in the next few days, I think we should make a presentation at that meeting that we are starting this initiative. We don't know where it's going to go, but we're going to need your help. Because I don't distinguish between drugs, and a lot of people do, and I think that takes us off into the weeds. If you're dealing an illegal substance that's defined under the narcotics laws, then I don't care what it is, you get the same sentence. That'll do a lot, because we're all sitting around saying, well, you know, what he did wasn't as bad as what he did, and what he did and bad. I don't care. It's all the same thing. It's addictive. So what's the difference? So thank you.
Okay. Seth, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for the job you do every day.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, the next item is approval of the consent. Is there any item that you'd like to move?
I'd like to discuss the health department and the nursing thing in jail.
Okay, what number is that? Number 2
Yes.
and is that it?
Yeah, I think that's it.
Okay. Okay, got a motion and second. All those in favor of approving the consent items, raise your right hand. Thank you. We're down to items for decision, the emergency service. Chris, I guess you're going to do that. I don't see Jeff. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you, Commissioners. So before you tonight to seek approval for a 3-year striker stretcher maintenance contract. So this is a traditional PM and repair contract that we have for our stretchers. And as I'm sure you have all seen, our stretchers are very mechanical today. We've come a long ways from the old just lever mechanism and pick it up. These are all manual operated push buttons, very expensive. Kind of put this in perspective, a single stretcher is about $18,000. The power load system that we use to actually assist with loading that stretcher into a truck ranges between $28,000 and $32,000. So a lot of mechanical and electrical features on those stretchers. This contract provides for annual PM as well as some replacement provisions for a lot of the commonly worn or replaceable parts, such as batteries, which are now about $800 per battery per stretcher. So those types of items add up really quickly. As we've discussed several times, we're continuing to look at ways to be more cost effective in our services. Going with this 3-year provision and through negotiating with Stryker has actually allowed us to incur about a 10% discount in regards to other contracts that have been provided in the past. That is what we're bringing before you now. I'll be happy to take any questions you may have on it.
Gentlemen, any question of Chris? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the, okay.
Yes, sir.
Chris, do you know if the other non-Beaufort County paramedic units have this similar type of a contract?
I can't speak to that. I'll be happy to find out for you, but I don't know whether they have a
Some
contract.
economies of scale?
I'm interpreting your question to say, could we all merge together as a county and get a cheaper price?
Yeah.
I'm not sure of that, but I'll be happy to investigate it for you.
Okay.
We'll let you know on that.
Right now, you need to get
Yes, sir.
Any other? Motion to approve and a second. Is there any other discussion? If not, all those in favor of the 3-year contract, raise your right hand. Those opposed? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Jim, would you like to come up and we'll go ahead and handle the item that was pulled? You didn't have anything else on here, did you? No. Okay. Okay.
Well, okay, I was a little confused. I'm sorry to hear about your mother.
Oh, thanks.
When this came up, it sounded like we were putting an additional nurse in the jail.
No, sir.
How many do we have in there?
3.
3 nurses for the jail.
This position has been open since September of last year.
And we have 42 inmates.
I don't know what since.
We had 42 inmates this month according to the jail report, and we're covering that 24 hours a day,
Correct.
7 days a week.
Correct. Now, we don't have somebody always in the jail. They may be on call for the jail.
Well, that's really what I wanted to find out. I thought there were only 2 in there. There's 2 nurses and a practical nurse.
That's correct.
Okay. Why do we need a practical nurse?
Well, just to divide the labor over the full week, the 24/7 is too much for just 2 nurses. So instead of paying for another nurse, the LPN is able to take care of some lower level duties, such as passing medications and stuff like that.
And before we went to full-time nurse coverage, we had what, Southern Hospital or Southern Health, and they were there 4 hours a day, like 5 or 6 days a week.
I think they were there 5 days a week, 10 or 12 hours a day, something like that.
And the general statute requires that we only provide emergency services to jail inmates.
Standard of care is what they call it. Emergency services, a referral for emergency service would be one of those standards of care. So if somebody looked like they were having a heart attack or something, take them to the emergency room.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, we need a motion to ratify this on page 9 from the Health Department. Okay, second. I'll second that. All those in favor of the motion, raise your right hand. Those opposed? Thank you, Jan.
Yes, sir.
All right, Lloyd, you're up. Looks like you're carrying a lot of weight.
Well, the bid package is with me just in case.
Oh.
Never know. So we've met quite a few times, I feel like, on the RFP for revaluation. I've met with y'all several times, talked about different things over the last year and a half about the revaluation. I've certainly paid attention to what it is that y'all have said y'all are looking for. I know what we're looking for as a county. I like to think we do. So we put out an RFP. The RFP, of course, request for proposal, went out publicly. With help, of course, from Anita's office. We did through a lot of different mediums. We had 4, I believe, companies come back with reasonable bids. We had a mandatory bid conference, actually, before the we got too far into the process where you had to attend, actually, and be able to hear some of my concerns and the staff concerns. We discussed those. We had representatives from all 4 companies actually show up from that. Had a lot of good questions. As far as it goes, the bids should be in front of you. There should be the amount. One, I would say, was a bit higher than the rest. As far as that goes, 2 were kind of in line with each other. 1 was a bit lower. Based on discussion, based on what I'm hearing, based on our needs, looking at the bid proposal and what's in front of you, I believe that the intention was Vincent Valuations. The reason for that is, again, the belief was supposed to be that, to me, was that we wanted a comprehensively done program where it would be a lot of input on them, yet still a lot of method if you read their appeal, or their bid, sorry. I'm used to doing appeals in front of you. If I keep saying appeal, did it last week, I guess. If you read their proposal, it does have quite a bit in there about, public education and other things that I feel went a little bit past the rest as I was asked to look for. That said, and I'll be candid, the lowest bidder's a good one too. I mean, it's certainly something to consider there as far as that goes. I think the concern was Vincent actually did put together maybe a bit more of a package, maybe a bit more items in there mentioned, and I think that's going to hit a lot of the spots that we're worried about coming out of that last revaluation. The folks that we did use last time was a bidder. They were not the lowest bidder. They were not in that category, and I believe, and I've even spoken before and said, I think the intention was maybe to go in a different direction, do some things differently. So again, as far as that goes, that's where I'm at, I believe. But like I said, the lowest bidder, good company, great company, good, but the one that I feel was fitting what the discussion had been and everything else, what I heard earlier, what I'm hearing is, again, Vince Valuations. I believe I had a question.
Look, just give us, or really give the public, a thumbnail of the time schedule on this. We award the contract, say we award the contract tonight, that's what you're asking for, I presume.
That is correct.
Okay, and let's say we award the contract tonight, then what happens next, and then when do we do the appeals, and when is it final, and when do you get a tax bill from this reval?
Okay, I don't mind doing that. We can get into that now if we want. So basically, I'm smiling because I love any chance I get to say that on record is great to me, because this is something that we were just talking about. Me and Courtney Benny, my assistant, were just talking about education. We're talking about getting the public to know. So I don't mind saying that at all. But to my understanding, the next step, and part of that lies with the county policies and county whatever, but I spoke to the county manager, and I think the next step would be, of course, getting a proposal, or getting a contract together, of course, with that company. That, of course, would be something they would, we would get probably from them and then look over, then, of course, have the county attorney go over, make sure everything appears to be, well, all the things that we said in the RFP that we would need, along with what they're providing. After that, we actually had for them to start as soon as July 1st of this year, the company. We wanted folk, at least a project manager on site at that point. We wanted to go ahead and go forward. I'll be here next month, actually, asking for approval for some office space, fairly affordable office space here in town. We found we're going to do a little smart area for that. They would then have people on the ground in here, hopefully, early fall, other than just the project manager. So what that means is you would have, that reval company would have boots on the ground, whoever that would be, have boots on the ground out there looking at houses. They would be doing a walk around of the houses and other properties in the county. They would be looking to make sure, of course, that our property information is correct. That is something they would be doing, that company. They would also be looking at the sales and quantifying where they are in certain areas, up, down, and everything else. Of course, our staff would be assisting as much as possible. That'll go on right through fall of 2024, really. At that point, we're going to get really serious with the final items as far as the, looking over the sales we've put together and what those ratios are and what the adjustments need to be. All that would then go, you, of course, would have a schedule of values, which would be what would be presented to y'all about that time too, would tell you what we believe a lot of the different changes would be and the things that y'all would vote on and the public would get a chance to look at, meaning like, for instance, townhouses, this means this, or these areas are these, and these values are this, and all that kind of, it's like a manual for revaluation, I guess you could say. That would all be presented at that time period, and go from there. Well, the effective date of the valuation will be January 1st. We hope to have, and I'm going to kind of be hesitant here, of course, but I would hope to have the notices out. I personally have never wanted to do in December. I've never been a December guy. I just think that's dangerous. If I got a reval notice in December, I probably wouldn't take it well personally. So I've always been kind of a hopefully January right after kind of guy, and that's kind of what I would be aiming for. But we'll see as it goes, because we do 2.5 years from that date. So that would probably be the timeline of that, I would say, sometime around then. And then after that, appeals. You begin in informal appeals, then Board of Equalization appeals, and then Property Tax Commission if you needed.
So that's January of 25.
Yes, sir.
That the notices of the new value would go out.
In that time period, and like I said, I want to be careful with that because things do happen to change, but around that time period, I would say, fairly.
Okay, thank you. John?
Lloyd, there's $200,000 difference between what you're recommending and the lowest bidder. Help me understand why we...
Yeah, so again, as was laid out to me and as what's been in front of me or whatever else, the two different ones that we're discussing as far as that goes, the difference, and the only real difference in that is One has put together, I guess you could say, pretty comprehensive, here's how we're going to do everything. The questions have been extensive, everything else has been extensive, the references have been great from them, everybody that I've called, and I've called several on every one of these. Everything's been good coming out. It seems that it's a turnkey, pretty easy reval. Not to say that the lowest bidder wouldn't do that either. They may do a wonderful job as far as that goes. And I'm hesitant to say this, but I will say it's a low bid.
Are you getting bad references from Piner?
I have not received a bad reference from Piner. I have talked to a county that had some concerns about ongoing work, but not anything in the past reval, no. In other words, and maybe I should signify that, in other words, I will say you could probably look hard enough at any of these companies, you're going to find somewhere you don't like them somewhere, but they all do a little bit of ongoing work for the counties, other than just revals too, but I have had some feedback there about, just, I won't say negative as much as some concerns of a county under contract, but nothing that I would say. Like I said, if y'all look me in the eye and said, can you make this work? My only concern would be, I wouldn't really want to, I'm being careful. I really wouldn't want to come to y'all asking for more money for something else mid-swing. I wouldn't want to get some more on-board staff or do something like that. That would be a bit of my concern, I guess, and that's where I'm really at.
That's probably true of any of them. Are they North Carolina companies?
I'd be really, they all four are. Well, 3 out of 4 are. The 2 we're discussing are, yes, sir. They're both local to Eastern North Carolina. I would say that could happen, but I don't see that happen as much with the one. But it could happen with any of them.
I believe that you said that Vincent gave a more detailed presentation and hit on in their presentation.
Yeah, and I have those with me.
The concerns that you had.
Exactly. He actually broke it out a lot. And the first one did as well, Piner President did as well to some degree, but Vincent went probably a step above that, laid out who was going to do what, how are they going to do what, the waterfront, the commercial, each little piece went on to that. I don't think, if anything was missed of our concerns, I don't remember it. I mean, we talked about our concerns and they nailed it and hit it. And I'd want to see that in the contract, mind you. I'd want to see that in the agreement as well, that we're going to do this and do that and go on with that. But again, I'm not going to sit here and say that maybe the other wouldn't be able to do that as well. I just have concerns with the amount bid and the going on as far as that goes, getting the product that we want. But aside from that, I mean, it's a choice of the board. I'm going to make whatever work I can work, however I'm going to make it work.
Well, I can't speak for everybody, but I think that we all had some issues with the previous one, and it was a low bid. And a lot of times you don't realize that until you get into the appeals process. And based on what you've told us, I think that we need to make sure that we get the best work possible, technical work, and that it's not the low bidder.
Like, again, what you've said to me, Chairman, has been said by other commissioners as that exact statement, and that being a problem, and I guess that's my mindset, and maybe that's where I'm at with this as well. That said, I will say, things happen. I mean, last time with the reval, there were some other things going on too. I mean, I'll defend that company a bit with the software and stuff, which I don't think would be happening this time for sure, but you do worry a little bit. I'm not going to sit here and say our data is perfect. I mean, we work on it constantly. We look at things. The market is changing 100 miles an hour. I certainly wouldn't want to get into a position where I felt that we were running into what I've heard you gentlemen tell me, which is, and staff tell me, which is, we don't want to run into, hey, that's not in the contract. We don't want to run into, hey, we weren't ready for that. I don't want to do that. I want to get a turnkey as much as possible, and that's kind of why I'm leaning into that. And maybe I'm wrong, but regardless, my staff's willing to put in as much as they can too. We're going to make this the best reval you've seen in this county. I know that sounds cliche, but I mean that's what we're aiming for.
And both of them got all the people, all the vendors got the same bid. I mean, and you told them, each one of them knew what you was looking for.
To my understanding, we put out we put out the original RFP, we put out 2 budget, sorry, I'm looking at Anita, say budget amendment, I apologize. 2 RFP amendments, where we did add some data in there. I had a parcel count, correction in there. We had some items like that. And then, as you know yourself, we had an open public, bidding. We wanted to see what the bids were and anything else, had a side for that. And again, we actually had a mandatory bid conference, which probably not too many of those in this county, I wouldn't think, but we, in the past, but we certainly had one. Let them speak.
And bid number 2 covered everything that you was looking for.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Are you going to be back with the contract when you get it to share it with us?
I would think so. I would think that would be the normal policy of the county as far as that goes. And again, and I'll repeat, I have all intention of taking that directly to the county attorney too and looking that over, making sure that everything fits our needs and also is, of course, abiding by statute and everything else.
Any other comment or question? If not, I'll entertain a motion to move forward with Vincent. Is there a second? Oh, okay. All those in favor of the Vincent contract for the reval that'll be coming up, raise your right hand. Those opposed? Thank you, Lloyd. Wes, you got some good news.
Always come with good news.
Always got some good news.
Good evening.
This will make a lot of neighbors happy.
I hope so. Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you for having me here tonight. I'm here tonight to discuss awarding the contract for our Yatesville collection site improvement project. As you may recall, during the budget process for fiscal year 22, we presented a 3-phased approach to making improvements to our current collection sites. And the Yatesville site was our initial start point because of the safety issues on that site and doing phase 1 on that project. So on March 16th, we issued a RFP seeking bids for this project. We only received one proposal, so we reissued on April 4th, and a copy of the latest RFP was attached for your reference. Hopefully you could read it. It was a little bit small, but it was rather lengthy, so I hated to clog up your agenda with so many pages. Excuse me. The scope of the work on this project involves removing the steel platform at the site, which we've discussed before is in very poor shape. Some retaining wall repairs where the wood has caved away in certain areas. Relocation of the compactor unit at the site away from the raised platform where they'll throw into from the ground because there's a low height there. New concrete pads for the open top containers that will be based against the wall. Site grading, additional lighting, and safety improvements at the site. 2 bids were received on April 20th, which Mr. Booth was glad to be there to help us out with that. B.E. Singleton & Sons provided the lowest bid of $55,905. A bid tabulation sheet was attached. You can see the other bid was quite a bit more than that bid. Staff spoke with B.E. Singleton on April 22nd just to discuss the scope, make sure everybody was on the same page regarding what was involved, performance requirements, and their bid details. And after satisfaction with that, decided to approach you all with this award. Following the award of the contract, a pre-construction meeting will be held, or would be held with B.E. Singleton as well as Republic Services to discuss the process. And that will include setting a start date for construction. The contract allows 45 days for construction, during which that time the site would be closed to the public. It's not possible for us to have the public in there and the contractor working at the same time. So as I mentioned, funding for phase 1, which this is included in phase 1, was approved as part of the fiscal year 22 budget process. So my recommendation would be to approve awarding this contract to B.E. Singleton for the amount of $55,905.
So move. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Any discussion? All those in favor of the contract with B.E. Singleton, raise your right hand. Got a request.
Okay.
Can you visit with Republicans, see if we can keep the Beach Ridge site open 7 days a week during that 45-day period?
Yeah, we can definitely have that discussion. Obviously, we'll be talking with them about, it's not a problem, but remedies with their contract, because they won't be operating the site for possibly up to 45 days. So making sure that we're covered elsewhere. We'll discuss that with them.
Well, the reason I would say Beach Ridge over the one at Sydney is that, you can drive up.
Right.
And use the Beach Ridge site versus.
And it may be that we can do that for more than one site. We'll discuss that extensively with them.
All right.
Making sure that we're covered.
Thank you very much.
And just as a quick update, the engineer is in progress on the next 3 sites, River Road, Cherry Run, and Chocowinity. That would be the next phase of her design. So tried to get an update right before the meeting, but she was out of the office. So.
Will you have signage at these sites that you're rehabbing, telling everybody where to go, where they can go?
Yes, we'll definitely have some signage, specifically when the site's closed, where to go. We'll have some advanced signage saying the site's going to be closed beginning this through possibly this. Hopefully it won't take 45 days, but who knows, especially with the weather and everything. So we'll make sure it's communicated well through signage. We'll work with emergency management, trying to get it on their Facebook page. We'll have it on the website. We'll get it out there just as much as we possibly can.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you all. Have a good evening.
Anita? More good news, right?
Yeah, we got plenty of money, I guess. Or we got some money. We'll talk about that a little bit later. We don't have maybe as much as some folks at the school board might think we have, but we'll get to that in a moment. Are we doing that first, the finance report?
Yeah.
Okay.
Whichever you.
Yeah, that's fine. We're ready.
Okay.
So I want to start out with the sales tax. We did receive notification today on the February distribution, and I apologize if some of the slides are small to the audience. I do have handouts for you that's in larger print that you can refer to at your desk. But these schedules get really big when you're analyzing multiple years, and so they look small on the presentation. So everybody's found their sales tax revenue. It's the very first sheet in your packet there, and you can see the February sales were $980,214, and we're set to receive those funds on May the 15th. So we have 4 distributions remaining in this fiscal year because of that 3-month lag in the distributing from the state. So those February sales were up actually 25% from the same month last year. So that's the 980,000 compared to the 787,000. And we're actually right in line with the state. The statewide it was up 22%, and we're at 25%. So all in all, if we extrapolate those 8 months that we have, is it 7 or 8? 8 months that we have received, yes, and we annualize that, you can see that I'm estimating, assuming that sales tax continues to come in as it has this year, that will end up at about $12,162,000 for our total sales tax, and we budgeted the $10,725,500. So right now, currently, we're running a $1.4 million surplus on sales tax. So again, sales tax really high. There seems to be a lot of consumer confidence. Still, people are purchasing. Inflation, I'm sure, has a small part to play in that with prices being higher. Of course, our sales tax is going to be higher. But we're looking currently at another year of really high growth, 12.32% after a 14% growth year last year. And typically, we'd expect our sales tax to only be up between 4 or 5% from year to year. So that brings me to the next slide, which is just simply a graph of that information that I just showed you. And the thing that I'd point out here is that we're looking at that navy top line there. That's the current year sales tax for the 8th month graph there. And so typically what we would expect for the February distribution is for there to be a downturn if you look at the other years. So we have a really high year for the December collections. You see all those spikes there, and then in January we usually have a fallback, it slides, and then in February it usually slides an additional amount before it spikes back up in March with people getting out and doing their spring, whatever they're doing, buying. I guess their flowers at Lowe's is what I think they're doing, getting ready, getting out and about. But of course it was a little different this year. We've already seen that spike for February, so what's going to happen in March the rest of the year? I'm really not sure. I would expect that based on history, we'd expect even another increase next month. But at this point, sales tax is kind of throwing me for a loop. We're hearing on the news some comments about, well, people are throwing out the R word now for, recession, and we've just gotten the information on the first quarter GPD, and there was a contraction there. And if I'm remembering correctly, I believe the official definition of a recession would be 2 consecutive quarters of negative GPD. So, we've had 1 quarter of that. But I'll tell you that to say that when I was going through and doing some research for the bond refunding, I had to go back to the years 2006 and 2008 because we had some school bonds those years. And I happened to peek at a sales tax number. It just kind of appeared before me back in 2006 and 2008. And I was a little shocked because the sales tax number that I was looking at for 2008 was like 10.5 million. And I said, wait a minute, 10.5 million, that's around what we're getting now. So for kicks and giggles, I just decided that I'd go through and graph our sales tax all the way back from 2006 to 2021 to just kind of see, how we've been doing for the last 15 years. So I have that up on the TV. You have that before you. So the concerning thing about this, of course, is that before the housing bubble, the Great Recession, we were at 10.5 million in sales tax. And then over the next 2 years after that, we hit a low in 2011 at 6,538,000 in sales tax distribution. So that was a $4 million drop in our sales tax, which equates to 61%. And then after bottoming out in 2011 at the 6.5 million, it's taken us 10 years all the way up till this year, 2021, to actually get back up to and past that 10.5 million. Now, I don't say that to scare you. I don't think something this drastic is going to happen. If we were to see a recess, this was the Great Recession. But the fact is, I don't know, and really no one knows what the economy is going to do. And there are a lot of positives still in our economy. I mean, we have a 50-year low on unemployment. Consumer spending still does seem to be strong. The feds are meeting tomorrow. They're expected to raise the interest rates 50 basis points, which I think is probably a good thing. It's going to help cool down probably the economy and spending a little bit, certainly borrowing. But there are a lot of negatives. We've got the invasion in Ukraine and all the sanctions associated with that. So we've got U.S. imports are less than exports. The individual economic stimulus money, that everybody's enjoyed for the last couple of years during, 2020 and 2021. I think that's kind of flushed out through our economy, so that's going away. And then, of course, I know from personal experience in our boat business, there's a terrible supply chain issue still happening. I mean, we're waiting 12 to 16 months to get motors for our boats. So, all these things play into what's going to happen with our sales tax number. And the bottom line is, I don't know what's going to happen. I can tell you that we did get numbers from the league. So the North Carolina League of Municipalities, they do projections for revenue, and they're projecting growth again next year for 22-23 at 3.75%. So Brian and I, we were being conservative, and we budgeted it at 3% growth. But still, it's, I'm not sure anybody, I say all that to say I'm not sure anybody knows what sales tax is going to do.
This looks good, but remember, there is no such thing as enough money.
Okay. All right, so next, speaking of sales tax, so realizing that our sales tax has been extremely high, and also realizing that we did all the bond refundings last year that saved us so much money on the school debt, it dawned on me that I probably needed to look at the calculation to make sure that we're actually giving the schools the adequate amount of restricted sales tax that we're required to by state statute. And just as a reminder, you don't have a copy of this, this is up on the screen, but the Article 40 and 42 sales tax that we get, 30% of Article 40, it's also known as the half-cent school tax. 30% of those revenues that we get from the state for that article, we have to give to the schools to fund their capital. And then on the Article 42, it's known as the school's additional half-cent sales tax. There's a mandatory requirement of 60% of whatever we get from the state for that article to either be sent or spent on the school's behalf. And I say that because our school debt payments that we make, that qualifies as a expenditure that we can use to count towards this 30 and 60%. So having said all that, here's the calculation. I actually sent you an email about this. I believe it was early last week or maybe the latter part of the week before. So just want to caution everyone before I start talking about this. There's 3 columns on this page. There's last year's 2021 actual numbers. There's an estimate for the current year we're in right now, and then there's an estimate for next year. So I want to let you know that the only column that's not going to change on this sheet is the last year's column that's audited, because we know those numbers. Okay? I'm going to go ahead and tell you right now that what you're seeing for fiscal year 21-22 and 22-23, they will change. These are only estimates. And they'll either go up or down depending on our next 4 sales tax distributions that we get for this year. Okay, when I put this schedule together 2 weeks ago, we had not gotten information on the February distribution, so we'd only gotten 7 distributions at that time, and I was estimating the remaining 5. So having said all that, I've shown what we're required to give the schools, and if we just look at 2021, you can see the 2 articles, the amount that they were required to get, simple calculation on the amount we got times the 30% for 40, for Article 42, the amount we got times 60%, and then the lottery funds that we get, 100% of that has to go to the schools, okay? So for 2021, the total due to the schools or paid on behalf of the schools is $3,281,350. And then we look at, well, what did we give the schools or what did we pay to the schools? And you can see the school debt payments were a little over $2 million. We did the bond refinancing, so that $65,000 that we paid to Davenport and to Regions Bank for being our escrow agent, and for Bob, our attorney, we get to count that, so they were $65,104, and then we made direct payments to the school of $1,270,878 for them to do whatever capital projects they, I guess, so desired and that their board approved. So you can see that we actually owed the school $3.281 million. We paid or sent them or paid on their behalf the $3.348. So we actually paid an additional $67,000 over and beyond what we actually had to pay to them. And most of that, you can see, is the refinancing cost that we paid. So I knew that when I did this calculation for last year's audit, we were getting really close. So that was another reason that I looked at it. And so when I look at the current year, the way we're trending with sales tax on the revenue side and what's required to be distributed, that $3.428 million is based on, if we go back here, look at the bottom, you see that 8 months annualized? I'm assuming we're going to be at the $12,162,000 at year end, which is an estimate, but it is based on that estimate, that $3.428 million. And then if we look at the payments that we have budgeted on behalf of the schools, debt payments and their direct contributions to them, it's just a little over $3 million. So what I'm saying to you right now is based on what we've collected in sales tax so far and what we have currently budgeted to the schools for capital, I feel like we're going to have to pay them some additional funds based on the state calculation. Again, this will change and I will not be able to do this calculation on actuals until September. So in September, 2022, we will get our June distribution because of that 3-month lag, and then I will be able to make the calculation to know exactly how much we owe them. I tell you this tonight because I am going to need to do a budget amendment before year end, and I know nothing else to do but to base it on an estimate of what we think it is going to be in June. So. And then for next year, 22-23, of course, the revenues go up that are due to the school because of the 3% increase growth factor we've plugged in. And then everything else, of course, the debt payments are what they are. They go down slightly because of the refinancing. The $2,000, that is the payment to the escrow agent that handles the escrow funds for the school bonds that were refinanced, so we get to count that. And then we just simply brought over that current allocation that we're given to the schools this year, not knowing what the board's going to want to do with that in next year's budget. So having said all that, I mean, that's even almost too far out to start talking about because those numbers are going to change, but at this point in time right now, that's what it's looking like for 22-23, based on what we've put in the budget. Any questions about that? So you will see an item for me next month. I have a lot. This will be one of them. To appropriate, it won't be fund balance, it'll be appropriating sales tax revenue to the schools. An estimate. And then in September, I'll come back and let you know that exact payment.
The 22-23 is based on sales tax growing at 3%.
3%.
Okay.
You said 2021, and we're gonna pay them $67,000.
I wouldn't say we overpaid them. We sent them more than we were required to statutorily. No, we don't really base what we give to them on this calculation. This calculation's done.
Anyway, you got 67,000 plus.
They did, and that, like I said, is associated with that refinancing cost. Okay? Any questions?
Do we make one payment a year?
We do 1/12 payments.
1/12 payments? Okay. So the catch-up will be in the 12th payment, right?
So what will happen is in September, there'll be the catch-up payment, and we'll still have the audit open because we don't finalize the audit until October, so I'll be able to accrue that back to this year, to the prior year, so that everything's accounted for in the correct year.
And that 1/12 ends in July, is that correct?
The 1/12 we make every 12 months, July through June 30th, to the schools.
Hey, I know that's true on operating. Do we do the same thing on capital?
Yes.
How about on the lottery? I was thinking lottery's once a year, isn't it?
Yeah, lottery, yeah, we pay it to the schools at 1/12, but we draw it down from the state at one time.
I got you.
Okay, if there are no more questions on that, then I'm going to move into the Arp Funds. Just wanted to let you know that we have submitted the Arp report. We're going to be required to submit that annually, April 30th every year, and that was submitted last week. So just a little bit on the Arp report, and Brian may have to jump in and help me on this, but so, you know, if we move forward in my presentation, this is a snapshot of our uses of the ARP funding. And these were all voted on by the board. We had, we set aside $4 million for broadband. We set aside $1.5 million for that multi-purpose building. And then we've appropriated $27,000 in jail architect fees. So those are the general fund uses, the $5.527 million. And then water fund, they've got, 6 or 7 projects there that they're doing. You can see them listed there. And so they've been allocated $1.609 million. So we still have remaining of the $9,128,034. We still have right at $2 million available. And everybody will remember what we did there. So I say all that to say that when we earmarked funding for all these projects, we were operating under an interim rule from the federal government that was very restrictive in what we could spend the funds on. You might remember Brian saying it was basically water, stormwater, broadband. I think they were the 3 areas of infrastructure that they really wanted to see us spend it on. And although some of our boards, wanted to spend it on solid waste, I even heard Commissioner Deatherage mention that last month. And maybe Commissioner Richardson he mentioned libraries, and we said, no, you cannot do that. That's not an authorized use of these funds. Well, at the time, they were not. But what happened was in January of 2022, the final rule came out. And the federal government said in the final rule that if you receive less than $10 million, which we did, we're receiving $9.128 million, then we're going to let you just claim a broad revenue loss of the amount of your allocation up to $10 million. And in sitting in all the Zoom meetings with the School of Government and the association, they highly recommended that all counties in North Carolina that got less than $10 million, Beaufort County being included, that we do that revenue loss allowance that they were allowing us, because it allowed us to do what they called MB square. I think I told y'all about that at maybe an earlier meeting. They said you get to maximize the benefit, that's the MB, of the funding from the federal government while minimizing the burden. That's the square part. So we actually came to you and brought this before you a couple months ago and told you that's what we intended to do. And when we submitted our report, that's exactly what we've done. So what we've told the federal government on our report that we submitted last week was that we're going to spend $4 million on broadband, contingent that we're going to get other state funding through grants, the GREAT grant and the CAB grant as a match. We'll use $4 million of our funding as a match to expand broadband in Beaufort County. So we wanted to show that so we can demonstrate that we're using that money to get the points on the assessment at the state level, that we were using Arp funds for the match. And then that remaining, $5,128,034, Again, the School of Government and the Association, they said what you need to do is you need to do like you did with your CARES funding. You need to show that you spent that on salaries and benefits for public safety and for other areas of general service government. And then that way, that's going to free up your fund balance. Remember, we did that with EMS, back with the CARES funding. What that does is by charging those salary and benefits against the Arp funds, that frees up all the budgeted money in general fund that we had for those salary and benefits. And it takes away all the restrictions, and you then spend that money on what you want, which we will in turn spend on these projects that I've got up there on the monitor that you already said you're going to use that money for. So we still have, like I said, a little less than $2 million remaining. It's open now to be spent on pretty much whatever we want. Okay? Any questions about ARP funding before I move to fund balance? Okay, fund balance. So we went through this in great detail at the budget planning retreat. I did hear some numbers being thrown around at our joint meeting last week with the schools. I think someone even said we had 38 million in fund balance. I think they just misspoke and meant to say 28 million, but we don't even have 28 million. So I just want to put these numbers out so everybody can see exactly how much fund balance we do have. So when we talk about fund balance, there are several different calculations of fund balance. We have what is called available fund balance, and this is the fund balance number that the local government commission looks at, and this is what we get compared. This is the number that's used when we get compared with our peer group, available fund balance. That's the first calculation that I have for you. And these are actual numbers. They're as of June 30th, 2021. So we're looking historically. Fund balance is always a snapshot. We're taking our audited numbers and looking back to see what our fund balance is. So you can see our available fund balance. That calculation is to take your total fund balance straight off the audit report, exhibit number 4, and then you subtract your external restrictions only. So we back out our non-spendables, which is our prepaid expenses for paying the insurance for the stop loss at the jail. We back off that $29,824. We back off any restricted by state statutes. And pretty much what this $7.2 million is sales tax that we've counted as revenue that we've not received yet last year. That was right at 7.2 million. And that gives us an available fund balance of $26,786,000 or 45.1%. Okay? So unassigned fund balance is our next calculation. This is the number I always look at because this number factors in not only your external restrictions but also internal restrictions that this board has placed on funding that we have. And like I said at your retreat, I'm going to hold you true to your word that you're going to do what you voted to say you're going to do. It's not to say you can't come back and undo it, but I'm going to go ahead and count that money as spent if you say you're going to spend it. So for unassigned fund balance, we take our total fund balance, same number we started with for available. We subtract out both our external restrictions and our internal restrictions to come up with an unassigned fund balance of $24.855 million, which is 41.9% of our annual expenditures for last year. Okay, and we do have a fund balance policy of 35%. You might remember back during the retreat that I showed you our peer group and the local government commission memo where they compare us to other counties and that we were the median of the group both in 2020 and in 2021. So even though our fund balance is high, it's 41.9%. See, I said available fund balance. I used the wrong word. Let me go back. Even though our unassigned fund balance is 41.9%. We were right there with our peer group. And I think the reason why every county's fund balance went up last year, and it's because of the COVID funding. It's because of all the federal and state funds that were flooding into counties. So we did surpass what we said we would be at with our own policy of 35%, but then again, when we look at everybody else, so did they. And consequently, the year before in 2020, our fund balance was 34.9%. We were right on it. Okay, so, but doing all that research for that budget retreat, I found out, I learned something I never knew, that 8% minimum requirement that the LGC says we must have, 8% of our expenditures must be set aside as fund balance, that is not considered in that available fund balance. I really always thought it was part of that restricted by state statute calculation. You would think it would be, right? They require it, why wouldn't it be? Well, it's not. So if you come and ask me, what's our actual spendable amount of fund balance? You then have to take that unassigned fund balance number and subtract the 8% minimum that we're required by law to hold. So really, we've got the $19.462 million that's available right now to spend in the general fund. Not saying you need to go out and do that, but just wanted to clarify those different fund balance amounts. Pardon me? Yeah, it did. It shrank a little bit. Are there any questions on fund balance?
Well, if you spend the 19 million, then we're down to 8%.
If you spend the 19 million, then you're down to 8%, and I know nobody wants to get near 8%. I don't even think we want to get below 25, is what I've heard this board say. And I didn't include, I also did some scenarios on what the numbers would look like if you did drop it to 25 or 20%, and I failed to include those, but I can send those out in an email if I need to.
Any questions on the financials?
You were stating that we was in the medium with other counties. When you look at that, where we are in the medium with other counties, you got other counties that's doing different things, you like building libraries and doing, is that part of, do they still have, after doing all the things they do, they still have a 41% fund balance? Or is it?
Okay, that's a great question. So I'm going to say no, and the reason I'm going to say no to that, well, I'm going to say it depends. I sound like an attorney. I'm going to say it depends. So if we look back at, can we bring my presentation back up on the fund balance piece, please? Okay. So if you go back and look at this spreadsheet here, the schedule, it depends on if the board has made an internal designation that they're going to do that.
Then,
or if they've actually issued a PO and contracted with a vendor to start a project.
okay.
Because if you've contracted and you're actually doing a project, it becomes an external restriction, you're obligated, then it would be.
Okay.
But if they've just said, I think we want to do this, let's put some money aside, that's an internal restriction, that would not be reflected in that number, because remember I said the LGC uses available fund balance when they compare us.
You want to go into the
Yes.
audit contract?
Yes, thank you. So it is time for us to engage an auditor for our annual audit. We did go out for bids 3 years ago, and we had an intent at that time that we would work with the auditor for 5 years. However, the contract is an annual contract and awarded on an annual basis. We are very pleased with the current auditor, Thompson, Price, Scott, and Adams, and I am recommending that we contract with them at a price of $55,250 to complete the fiscal year 21-22 audit. There was a slight increase from last year's audit price. It went up $1,500, 2.8% increase, but I thought that was extremely reasonable considering the inflationary rates that we are seeing.
Yes. Wouldn't question John's.
How many years are we into that? 5 year?
So we sent the bid out in 19, so they would have done our 19 audit, 20 audit, 21 audit. I think it's the fourth year, 5.
One coming up is 4.
I think it's 4.
Any other question? Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, raise your right hand. Those opposed?
Thank you.
Anita. Gentlemen, we're down to 7 o'clock. What's the wishes? You want to keep going?
Are you good?
Yeah.
Can I stand?
Yeah, with John and I, we probably need to take at least a 5-minute break.
John, can you please come down, pick up, John? You all right? Yeah? All right.
Can I bring you anything, John?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
We're back in session. There we go. All right, we're down to Katie, voting delegate for the 2022 annual Naco conference.
Yes, sir. Some of you will be going to Colorado for the annual Naco conference, and a delegate and an alternate are needed for the business meeting that's going to be held on July 18th.
Entertain a motion.
I make a motion that the chairman and vice chair be the voting delegate and alternate delegate.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Thank you. The next item is the strategic plan update. John?
Well, I was going to ask Brian if he's had any more conversations with with Naco and what we can look forward to in a timeline.
Yes, sir.
I know we don't want to start this, obviously, in the middle of the budget process, but we need to get on somebody's calendar.
Right, so with the Association of County Commissioners, not with NACO, but I have had conversation with them. We actually have a conference call set up on Wednesday of this week from 10 to 11. Be glad to plug any of the Board of Commissioners in who want to sit in on that. It'll actually be a Zoom call, and that's with the leadership at the association, Kevin Leonard and his group, the senior staff who are going to help us through this project. So that's where we'll be talking about some of those things. Obviously, like you said, we want to get through budget, but we also don't want it to linger too long. We want to keep that momentum moving. So I am happy to plug anybody in who wants to sit in on that conversation. Just let me know. Again, it's Wednesday, this Wednesday the 4th from 10 to 11.
You plug me in.
Anybody else want to be plugged in on that?
Would it be all right if I have a question that I can forward to you and John?
Absolutely, yes, sir. That'd be great.
Send me an invitation.
Be glad to.
Okay, you good? All right, Commissioner Dethridge.
Not going to talk too much about this tonight. At the last meeting, we broached the subject of Beaufort County becoming a border county, which is going to happen. I don't know if it's happening altogether yet. We heard some data tonight from our district attorney that fentanyl is getting into our county in great abundance. We know that it's coming from Mexico. We know it's a wide open border. There's no interdiction. Well, there's some interdiction, but nowhere near enough at the border to stop the fentanyl. It's part of the plan. The plan is by the Biden-Harris open southern border resettlement project is to use the cartels to get these people across the border. And you have human trafficking, of course. It worked well with the asylum issue that made it almost legal for them to executively not enforce our sovereign border. However, the fentanyl was coming across. That's a terrible byproduct, along with the extreme costs we're facing right now, having so many illegals in this country. The ending of Title 42 is going to make it almost impossible to lose these people. Plus, it's going to be a great incentive factor. I'm estimating at least 300,000 people a month now trying to get across this border. But how can we get real data that it's happening here in Beaufort County? Fentanyl, what we heard tonight is promising in that what I think is actually happening. However, I would like to see some other data, and some of that data would be probably coming through the school system, because in the United States, the Supreme Court ruled we have to educate everybody, whether they are a citizen or not. That is a very real expense to the citizens of Beaufort County. It is a massive expense. Right now, it is truly millions and millions of dollars that Beaufort County taxpayers are paying to educate illegals. We need to see how much increase that is going to be. Plus, I would like to do some research and try to find to what extent I can find out through the Department of Social Services we can get additional data. If in fact there are some data points that we can reconcile as real enough as variables, and then we can see if there's an increase in those as well. Eventually, we're going to know whether Beaufort County is a border county or not, and maybe this Board of Commissioners will act accordingly at that point. And that's the progress so far. May or may not have it on the agenda next month, but look forward to at least every other month, if not more. I'm done.
Okay, let me add to that.
Go ahead.
We talked about last week determining how many, a way of estimating how many people there were in the county that are most probably here without citizenship, let's put it that way. Most of them are illegal, but without citizenship is a much kinder way of putting it. And within the school system, one of the measures, there are about 450, the reason I say about, so I lost the second page of the report, but there are about 450 students in the school system who are getting language assistance as a second language. Okay, there's 450 people in the school system at $14,000 per student. That's $7 million a year that the taxpayers are paying for to provide education to people who probably shouldn't be here at all. So that gives you an indication Beaufort County is a border county, because and look, 500 students in the school system in round numbers. We only have 6,000 students, so we're getting up to like 8% of the population of the school are possibly illegal.
Any other comments? All right. Randy, you're up.
Yes, my intent here was not to find out what the details were that happened in the jail Friday night, but to find out who to be disappointed in the fact that we weren't notified. I was asked Sunday afternoon what did I know about the jail incident on Friday night, and I didn't know anything about it. So that made me look bad, and I like to be in the business of making me look good. And so the county manager kind of answered part of my question this morning when we got an email from him, and he said he had just been notified and he was notifying us. So that told me that I'm not disappointed in him. So it must be on up the line. I'm a new commissioner, but I would think that we get notified. I know the school board gets notified everything. I mean, if a school bus gets bumped, my wife's getting a notification. So I don't need to know everything, but a death in the jail seems to be pretty big. And I don't know if am I right?
Charlie, you or Brian want to address that? I knew we got an email once we had more information.
We go by a playbook on just about every incident that we have. There is notification that's made to, in an inmate death, there'll be notification to the Department of Health and Human Services, to the District Attorney's Office, and to any other investigating agency that needs to be involved. In the past, the only expectation that I'm aware of would be through notification through the county manager's office and the county office to initiate a file with the insurance carrier and provider to set up a pre-file. To my knowledge, there hasn't been
I guess, any direct request from the commissioners of us for immediate notification. And just like with anything else, just, let us know what you want, and then we can figure out a way to make that work. But if we don't know that, then how do we know to notify you when you want to be notified? Does that make sense?
Yes, I didn't know what the procedure was and whether you were notifying. I just assumed that something like this, we would just, I don't need to know the details. I just need to know that it happened. So if somebody does call like they did, I don't have to say, I don't know what you're talking about.
Sure. So, the timing of things with how things would have normally have worked, and it did happen like that, where if the incident occurred on a Thursday afternoon at 2:30, then you probably would have known before the end of business that day. But the incident that occurred in the evening on Friday, with our notification going to the county manager's office and the risk management person who wouldn't be working until Monday, that notification happened today. So there wasn't any intent to deprive anyone of any information. It was just that was us going through our normal protocols and practices that we had at the time.
Sure. I understand normal protocol, and you're right, we hadn't had a policy since I've been here. But it is kind of tough when you hear it on Channel 7, and then you walk out of church and someone is asking you about it, and then you hear that y'all manager should have notified y'all. But me knowing my manager, I said he don't know it. I said he's not that kind of guy. He keep us informed of what's going on. Not that you have to do it, but sometimes common sense and common courtesy goes a long ways, because what you're hearing now, and you will hear it before the week's out, what we're hearing now that you're trying to hide something.
Sure.
And I don't believe that. I wasn't there when it happened. I don't know what happened, and those are the kind of things that you're not going to be able to control.
If we put a camera on.
Wait a minute, let me finish that, listen to you. But those are some of the things that you want to get in front of.
Sure.
Because a lie get halfway around the world before the truth can get the shoes on.
Sure. And if we put a camera on what we were doing at the time.
I didn't say a camera.
I'm just saying that. If I'm allowed to speak. If we put a camera on everything that we did and streamed it live for the world to see, there would still be calls from people that were covering something up. I mean, that's just the world that we're living in. So once again, I mean, I'm not apologizing for something that we didn't feel that we did wrong in any way. And the common sense things, there's a whole lot more common than there is sense. But if the board wants to know information, then you just have to let us know. And then we will put you into the playbook that we go by, and then incidents that happen in the future, maybe we won't have anything like this occur. But if we don't know, how do we know not to do it?
Like I said, it's not been a policy since I've been.
Sure.
I think that if a press release is issued, I think we just need to be copied on that. I think that would be.
Okay, so we send out about 700 press releases a year. Would the board like to have a copy of every press release for anything?
No.
So help me help you.
Okay. So would you?
I don't want 700. I'm going to tell you.
Sure. And I know you wouldn't. That's why I brought it up.
I don't want to.
Well, here again, I think if it happened on Thursday, we all would have known on Friday, but because it was a weekend. But
I can see how that happened.
Yeah.
Because I mean,
I didn't know what the policy was.
I was out about 30 hours this weekend. If y'all wanted to come hang out with me, then
No way.
I would have let you hang out with me.
Thank you very much.
Can I ask a few questions? Are you going to send out a press release on this?
We've sent 2 press releases.
I've got none. I am the publisher of Beaufort County Now. It's the largest online publication in the history of Beaufort County. I've got nothing.
I'm one of your loyal readers, I guess. I read this about every day.
The Sunshine List or all the Sunshine List?
Sure.
It's not? Okay. So you say you send out 700 press releases. I get very few of them.
If you send me your email address that you would like it
Many
to,
times.
if you send it to me, I will put you on our listserv for that.
Take it off.
If you send me your email address, then I will put you on a list for our press release.
Well, right now, as someone who's, I guess, by default in these days and times, a journalist, not getting a press release kind of seemed like a little bit of a cover-up. And we can make the comments, well, it was just an oversight once again. But when the largest online publication doesn't get any information whatsoever, and you're a reader yourself, have a lot of readers, I just wonder what's going on. Now, as a commissioner, I got nothing. And I'd like to thank Deborah Whitley, husband Clarence is here right now, for telling me what was going on, because I didn't know. I didn't get on my computer on Saturday. I had a lot of other things to do. But Sunday morning, there was Deborah contacting me on Saturday about what was going on. I appreciated that. I thanked her for it, because I did get a lot of requests myself, Randy, as to what was going on. And I remind you and I remind the public, the commissioners spend a lot of money for the jail and to run the sheriff's department. I think we should be in the loop, just like I think the largest online publication in the history of Beaufort County should be in the loop as well. Or I start thinking all kinds of things. So, I mean, let's get that straight. Stan at BeaufortCountyNow.com. I mean, take it down for edification, for posterity. I want to see a press release, if you're sending one to all these other podunk people who may be big contributors, I don't know. But if you're going to deny people that publish, where a lot of people see it, in favor of all these other folks that you send to, it just doesn't make sense. It just seems like you're trying to get away from exposing whatever you know to be the truth at the time. I appreciate a notification.
If you would send me an email with an email address, I will put you on our
At
list.
BeaufortCountyNow.com. That should register. I just told you.
Okay.
Simple.
Commissioner's got 2 minutes.
I'll use my 30 seconds.
Okay.
I think it's appropriate that we congratulate our clerk. She's now a master clerk, and we want to congratulate her for a job well done and keep up the good work.
We'll give her. Randy?
I'm good.
Hood?
I'm good.
John?
I'm good.
I got mine in.
You got yours in. That was a commercial. You got it in, all right. Okay.
Commercial is the truth.
I'll now entertain a motion to adjourn. Okay, we got a motion to adjourn. Second? All those in favor, raise your right hand.
This is not true.